It has been almost 1 year since I was hired here at Mecca Warehouse, which means that I have been building for almost 1 year. And in that year, I have done a good amount of builds. From my first high grade to my first repaint to my first master grade, I have learned a lot. And one of the big things that I have learned is what tools are a necessity, which is why in this video, I'll be going through the 6 tools I needed in my first year of Gunpla building. First up, and you probably guessed it, nippers. Now, when I say nippers, and for those of you that are new, nippers are what you use to snip the part off the runner. You might think of these, the Bandai entry nipper. This is the standard for anyone who is just getting into the hobby, as they are durable and affordable, coming in at just under $10. Now, while these do a job, they certainly aren't perfect. If you're serious about getting a better result, then you have to get serious about your nipper, which leads me to 2 options. First are the Disc Bay 3.0 single blade nippers. Now these are, like the name says, single bladed, which means the blade cuts through the plastic sprue on one side of the part, which then puts significantly less pressure on the plastic. Now in theory, this would mean the nipper is weaker and more prone to break, but according to Disc Bay, the 3.0s are tested to withstand more than 50,000 cuts on a 3mm plastic rod. Now, this is what I use and have been using ever since I upgraded on my entry nippers, and I could not be more pleased with them. You get a clean cut every time, they sit comfortably in my hand, and they leave very little cleanup for me after, meaning you could snap build a kit and no one would bat an eye at an unsightly nub or plastic stress marks. The other option is the God Hand Ultimate Nipper 5.0, which markets itself as the cleanest cut out there. The blade on these is super thin, which means cleaner cuts, but also means a more brittle blade, which is why you have to be super careful about what you cut and how you cut it. That's not to say that these are poorly made though, as the blades for the God Hand 5.0s were created one by one by a well-experienced craftsman in Japan. These are 2 amazing nippers that will do a fantastic job for any modeler, but personally, I go with the Disc Bay 3.0s mostly because of the price. The God Hands clock in at just under $60, while the Disc Bay nipper comes in at just $34. Maybe at some point down the line, I'll upgrade, but for now, I'm more than happy with my 3.0s. Now, a good set of nippers is probably the most obvious thing to invest in, but my next tool isn't really that obvious. I didn't actually pick this tool up until about 2 months ago, but since I did, I have used it multiple times in every build that I've done, and that tool is the parts separator. This thing has saved me so much grief and aggravation that it has more than paid for itself, which honestly isn't saying that much since it comes in at only $6. You need this, and let me paint a picture as to why. You sit down to build a model on your day off. You're snipping, you're snapping, you're having a great time when, oops, you accidentally put a piece in backwards. No problem, I'll just take it out. Except you can't. So you're trying to pry it open, you get a knife, but it's too thick to fit in between the pieces. You try your teeth, your keys, even your credit card, and all this to eventually break the piece out, now leaving you with an unfinished model. With this, the problem doesn't exist. You just slide in the part separator, wiggle it around, and boom, just like that, separated parts. If you only get one takeaway from this video, let it be that you decided to get a parts separator. I promise you will not regret it. And if you do end up getting one, or even if you already have one, check out our video going over all the uses it can provide, because there's more than you think. So now you have the tools necessary to snap build your kit with minimal nubs, but what if you want to go just that little bit further? Well, you're going to need to sand, which brings me to my next tool, glass file. Now, most people start their sanding journey with either individual sanding sticks or with sanding sponges, but without a doubt, the best option for sanding is to pick up a Razor Plus from Gun Primer. These are the best of the best. You sand, you wipe, and it looks clean. Sure, you can still go in with a higher grit to make it look seamless, but honestly, most of the time, I don't even bother because this looks so good. Just be wary if you are switching to a glass file from a sanding sponge, as this thing will eat plastic. The first time I used it, I turned a rounded edge into a flat one because of how much pressure I used. The only real reason I still have regular sanding sponges is to get a kit ready for painting, as you do not want to sand a whole kit with one of these. One of the nicest things about this Razor Plus is that it'll actually save you money in the long run. You'll stop having to shill out money for sandpaper every month, as these don't wear down and will give you a constant finish for years. I've used this for a couple months now, and I could not be happier. Once your kit is snipped, snapped, and sanded, it, you're gonna wanna make it stand out, which is why the next thing I would recommend is a good panel liner. And there is a few different ways to go about this. The first kind of panel liner that I picked up was a Gundam marker black fine line, and essentially the way it worked is you would take the marker, drag the tip through the panel line, and then wipe away any of the excess with either a Gundam mark remover, a Q-tip with some isopropyl alcohol, or, and this is the easiest way, with your finger. Now this is panel lining in its simplest form, very little cleanup, you don't have to worry about spilling your liner everywhere, and it's easy to apply with this fine line tip, but it only really works on unpainted kits. The fine line tip will just rip up any paint or top coat that you have applied, which is why I upgraded to some Tamiya panel liner. Now this is an enamel-based liner, meaning that you can put it over an acrylic paint and clean it up without having to worry about ruining your paint job. The way it works is you just drop a little bit into a panel, and thanks to capillary action, the liner will start to move up and down the groove. Once the panel line is filled in, remove the excess with a Q-tip doused in some enamel thinner. An important thing to note with the Tamiya panel line is that if it is applied straight onto plastic, it will cause the model to become brittle over time. So make sure to do a top coat before any application. Next is definitely the tool I have the most of, and that is paint sticks. I have about 60 of these, or at least I bought about 60 of these. Paint sticks seem to go missing all the time, but these have been so useful over the last year. The very first kit that I painted, I did not have these, and it was a nightmare. So much so that I just gave up on the way I was doing it, went back into the warehouse the next day and bought some and haven't looked back since. I just have some styrofoam that I stab the sticks into, and I can paint away, whether it's hand painting or airbrushing. You can even upgrade on these wooden ones, which do like to break, with some of the Display model painting clips, which feature rust-proof painted handles and rubber tubing reinforcements for a strong connection to the part. You can get 20 for just $6, but trust me, you're gonna want more than 20. Now this last tool is definitely the most expensive one, but also, in my opinion, is the most fun of them all, and that is an airbrush. Now this is one tool, but you're gonna need extras to make it work, like a spray booth, compressor, gloves, mask, but for this video, I'm just going to focus on the airbrush itself. Now I've used a couple cheaper options in the airbrush world, but the one that I use that I feel works the best for me has to be the Avanti dual action airbrush. You can find it some places for under $30, and you can even go and buy it at your local Harbor Freight store. Not saying you have to buy this specific one, but there are definitely things to look for in a beginner airbrush. The most important being that you want a dual action brush. This means that when you push down, just air comes out, and when you pull back, paint comes out with the air. This allows for more control over your paint job than with a single action brush. And for those of you that don't know, a single action, think of it as almost like a spray can. You press down, air and paint comes out. The next thing I would look for is the needle size, and personally I like to go with a 0.3 millimeter. This will give you a good blend of coverage over your piece and control with your paint job. I feel this one disassembles easily to do a full cleanup, which you will want to do after every painting session to ensure your brush keeps working to its full potential. But those are the 6 tools I used in my first year in the Gunpla space. Let me know if there are any ones I missed down in the comments below, and I will see you in the next video.